Okay. Uh, okay. We're live streaming now.
Yeah,
So
you're on
I'll
Facebook.
open up. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. This is Freedom Friday Forum of September 23rd, 2022. This is coming to you from the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division, UNIA HCLRC 2020. And this program is about saving Moses Cemetery. First, let me identify myself. I am Babu Mosim, a similar president of the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division, UNIA ACLRC 2020 in Washington, D.C. And I'm hosting this program, but I wouldn't be doing a lot of talking. This is a matter that we have to put out to the public, and we want the participants, or I should say the presenters, to have all the time in the world to give you the necessary information, because we have some action coming up. We have to do some work, and they have the information for us. But first, UNIACL, we do things, we open up with a ritual. I think some of you already know what we do. In any event, let me start with the official UNIA pledge to the flag. Okay. All right. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of her scattered Black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism, and I promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people, in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail, until all Black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. Of course, there's a matter of identifying ourselves, this being the UNIA ACLRC 2020, Heritage Division, UNIA Division 330. Heritage Division, we call it our Heritage Division because this is a division that comes all the way from the beginning of the 1920 convention in New York, where the Constitution was presented, promulgated, and presented to all the people, all Black people of the world, as their Constitution. And there's a preamble in it. And let me read that preamble to you. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League is a social, friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring to the utmost to work for the general uplift of the Negro peoples of the world. And the members pledge themselves to do all in their power to conserve the rights of their noble race and to respect the rights of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that if the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man, but with love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and the generations of men shall be called blessed. And with that, I greet you with peace and love. And I will move on. I will give the floor to the presenter. And let me first introduce them. We have with us Dr. Marsha Coleman-Adebayo, who is the president of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. She's been a long-standing fighter for justice. I am not going to give you what we call her resume. Yeah, that would be about 10 pages long or something like that. So that's a lot to put out there when we need this time. Right, Dr. Marsha?
Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you, don't mess with Dr. Marsha. You know, she may look like you could like a pushover because she's small and dainty and beautiful and all that stuff, and you might think, oh, there's somebody I can just sweet talk and yeah, no. That's why she leads the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. She's a fighter. We also have with us Robert Stubblefield. Robert is also a fighter. He's been out there in the trenches with BACC, I think from the beginning. Is that so, Robert?
Yep, for 6 years.
6 years. They've been fighting the authorities, those who would like to sell, to continue selling black bodies. And the fight is going on at this moment. It has not ended because Montgomery County officials refuse to accept the fact that African people are not for sale. So let me go on. We also have Reverend Dr. Julianne Robertson, another stalwart fighter. She's not here at the moment. She's running late because she's in traffic, but she soon will be on, and we will reintroduce her. So I don't want say much, but I will just open the floor for opening remarks to the presenters we have here. And now let me start with you, Dr. Marsha. I welcome you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for being that fighter in the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Baba Mosi. It's my honor to be a member of the UNIA. As you know, my grandmother was a member of the UNIA.
Oh, that I failed to mention that, didn't I?
Yeah, yes, and she had her ticket.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's an honor to be with you, and I cannot even begin to tell you how important UNIA, your presence, your leadership has been to the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. I think we are all inspired by UNIA. We're inspired by your leadership. And so, and I am under that leadership as well. So I am just incredibly grateful for everything you do. And Baba Singhor, Baba Zama, everyone who has played such an important role, both spiritually, physically, in this fight for justice in Bethesda. So on behalf of my grandmother and myself and BACC, thank you so much.
I give thanks for your grandmother.
I give thanks for her too. She was a fighter.
Yes.
I thought maybe what we could do, we have a 3-minute video because what I'd like to do, it's almost impossible if you haven't been to Moses to really imagine the devastation that has occurred in our community. And so I'd like to show like a little 3-minute piece, and then I'll have some comments after that, if that's okay.
Oh yes. Well, first of all, let me have Robert introduce himself first, and then we'll put that through. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Go ahead, Robert.
All right. Well, first things first, I just want to say thank you, Baba Mosi and UNIA, for having me here. My name is Robert. I've been with the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition for 6 years. I've been an activist and organizer since I was 12. And one of the things that I have learned, over the past several years, is that it is the streets that make things happen. I want to be very clear. It is street action, whether it is from the perspective of Garvey, King, Malcolm, the Panthers, that get stuff done. It is the streets that we get our power from. It is the streets we remain. It is the streets that we shall return. with that being said, like with that being said, I just want to say thank you all once again. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to add my comments and answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for being here. And it's not your first time, but you know, and it probably will not be your last time. And you know, I'm looking at you right now, and what's in my head is that this is a perfect candidate for membership in the UNIA. But I wouldn't say anything more than that. You go ahead, Sister Marsha.
Well, let me just show a video. I think the video speaks for itself. Robert, if you can help us with that. And then you and I, Robert, you and I can talk about what people are going to see in the video.
Okay, sure, no problem. So I got the screen up. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead. Just hopefully see this working. All right.
There you go.
So I'm here at Moses African Cemetery, and county is allowing trucks to come in and continue to desecrate an ancient African burial ground. And I just want to give the public an opportunity to see what's going on here at Moses African Cemetery. You can see the cat truck over here. So there's always been problems with water. This was actually wetlands. This was actually a swamp area. And they've had a lot of trouble controlling the water in this area, which is the reason why they used it as a burial ground, because it was agriculturally unproductive. And as you can see, what they're doing now is basically trying to, again, control, I think, the water issues at the end of the cemetery. But you can see that the men are down there. There are no archaeologists here on site, which is a requirement of the county, but Montgomery County doesn't care, of course, because this is an African burial ground. This is where Black people were laid. This is where enslaved people were laid to rest. Well, actually, no, this is actually a mass grave. This is what desecration sounds like. This is what desecration looks like. And so we need everyone to come out and support us.
Hmm.
I want to chase those to walk with me. Oh, just Lord, I want Jesus to walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Oh, lonesome valley. Lord, I want Jesus to walk with me.
Yeah, that's the end of the video.
Cool.
So, you know, it's literally impossible for people to really imagine what Moses Cemetery, African Cemetery is like, because when most people think about a cemetery that's been desecrated, they think about a cemetery where you have you have overgrowth of vegetation, and people are trying to find the headstones, or you think of a backwoods kind of place where people are, trying to find an area where there are burials. But in Bethesda, this is happening in downtown Bethesda. And this kind of desecration is taking place under the cover of the law. I mean, even the Ku Klux Klan would not have been able to desecrate an African burial ground the way Montgomery County has desecrated Moses African Cemetery. So what you've just seen basically is the scene of a crime. This is a crime. This is a crime against humanity going on in downtown Bethesda, Maryland, which is one of the richest areas in the world. This is what we call a ma'afa. This is the scene of massacres, mass murder, mass sexual violence against children, a criminal cover-up by Montgomery County officials, both in the past as well as in the present, under the leadership of Mark Elrich, who's the county executive. And it's a criminal desecration under the law of a sacred space of what I consider prisoners of war, because that's what we were. We were prisoners of war when we were brought to this country. And so, as Robert said, we have been struggling and fighting to stop this desecration for over 6 years. And we are in the process of exposing, literally on a daily basis, through the media. We've now written 2 books, speeches, and any other platform we can make that's made available to talk about this crime against humanity, a crime against our culture, a crime against our history, and a crime against the human beings that had every single right to be able to lay in that ground and to be at peace. So as many of you know, just a little short history lesson so we can bring everybody up to the same page. As you may be aware, from the mid-1700s to 1865, mass murder took place on River Road. Now, European historians like to call mass murder slavery, but we call it what it is in BACC. We call it mass murder. We call it European American barbarism, because that, in fact, is what was really going on River Road and throughout the Americas. We know now through our research, which has been codified in 2 books, that the average life expectancy of a kidnapped or trafficked African national, again, Europeans like to call our ancestors slaves, and we call them warriors. But the average lifetime of our warriors was only 20 years. So that means that by the time they were 10 years old, our warriors had lived half of their lifetime. They had been worked to death, they had been raped to death, they had been starved to death. And more importantly, Hollywood, I think in many ways have romanticized the sexual abuse of these little girls during slavery, doing what we call European barbarism. But for our children, for these little girls, rape was actually a form of murder, because 60% of these little girls would bleed out during childbirth. And one of the things that I'd like to do, just as a way of paying homage to these children, because when you think about this period of history, even though European historians have painted a picture of of adults being in that space, the reality is that European barbarism, what Europeans like to call slavery, was really a war against Africa's children. There were children in these death camps. And so, for example, the John Councilman Death Camp, which is in the same area of Macedonia Baptist Church across the street from Whole Foods, what they call the slave quarters, that's where Macedonia sits right now. Listen to the ages of these people on this quote unquote what they call plantation that we call death camp. John Conselman, he had one 21-year-old male Black, one 14-year-old male Black, one 5-year-old male Black, one 14-year-old female Black, one 12-year-old female Black, one 5-year-old female Black, one 14-year-old female Black, one 4-year-old female Black, one 3-year-old female Black. So when we say that this system was a system that was composed primarily of children, we're not using a metaphor here. The people on these death camps were literally children. And by 5 years old, in this kind of barbaric system, these kidnappers were literally renting out little 5-year-old girls on the weekends to their friends for entertainment and sexual abuse. In fact, Harriet Tubman was 5 years old when she started being rented out. So our current legal strategy that we're engaged in right now, so we are literally exposing genocide. We are literally exposing genocide, and it involved a significant number of children. So I need for you to, when you see the pictures that we just presented, Moses is a children's cemetery, and we have to get our heads around that. The people, the statistics, the people that I just read from the 1850s US Census that were on John Conselman's death camp, those are the same people that were in Moses Cemetery. Those were the bones that were being dug up that you just saw by the cat trucks. It's important for people to understand Moses, particularly what we call Old Moses, was a children's cemetery. It was a children's cemetery. And I must admit, if I sort of think about this, one of the research problems that I think sort of had a problem with when we first started seeing the desecration is that we were looking for large bones. When in fact, if we had had this research available to us, we would have been looking for little teeny shreds, because these were babies and children that were being dragged into this barbaric system. And Montgomery County has fought us every step of the way. But we are going to continue to talk about what really happened in the kind of barbaric system that they created throughout this United States. And we focused in on a small slice of it on River Road. So our current legal strategy, really, in terms of how we became so involved in the court system, really started last August when we inadvertently found out that one of the quote unquote owners of Moses Cemetery, the Housing Opportunities Commission, had decided to sell our ancestors to a developer named Charger Ventures. And the goal was to redevelop the land and build a dog park on top of our ancestors. And we all know that the goal of that kind of desecration is to humiliate Black people, is to make us feel powerless, and is to impress upon us that we're not really human. Because in fact, maybe Robert can expand upon this a little bit later, there's a dog cemetery in Silver Spring, which is treated in many ways much better. Almost anything would be treated better than Moses at this point, but it's treated like a sacred space, as opposed to what the video that you just saw. And so when we found out that they were trying to sell this land, BACC and our attorneys jumped into action, and we quickly filed a lawsuit that no one thought we could win. But through God's grace and our ancestors, we won a historic victory against the largest developer in Montgomery County, which means one of the largest developers in the world, the Housing Opportunities Commission, HOC. And we were able to shut down a $60 million sale through this lawsuit. And just as a side point, this is the third developer we have now run out of Bethesda, Maryland. On October 25th, 2021, we received a decision of our lawsuit by Judge Carla N. Smith. And she wrote, the court cannot ignore that plaintiffs, African Americans, are seeking to preserve the memory of their relatives and those with whom they share a cultural affinity. Nor can the court ignore that as early as the 1930s, when construction began in the River Road community, the deceased have been forgotten, forsaken, and their final resting places destroyed, or at a minimum, desecrated. So she confirmed that this was a cemetery that the county was desecrating, and she confirmed also that the community had been, in fact, the target of genocide or had been destroyed. Embarrassingly, the HOC decided not to accept Judge Smith's decision and has appealed her ruling. And this is a side point, because I don't think this is particularly important, although it might be just sort of humorous. And that is that the chairman of HOC is a Black man named Roy Priest. He's obviously, directing this agency on behalf of white developers. But, it's just important for us to know that we have these kinds of people in our community and develop strategies so that they can't continue to harm us. So on October 6th, we're inviting everyone, UNIA and all of our networks, to join BACC in Annapolis, as our attorneys will argue our case and that of our ancestors in the Special Appeals Court in Annapolis. And we really do beg people to come out. We need to fill up that courtroom on that day so those judges understand that our community is not going to lie down and allow these people to dig up our ancestors and to count us as non-humans, that we are going to fight back. And I know, Robert, please, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, but in my mind, what is this case about? HOC is arguing that they have the right to sell Black bodies to a private company or to individuals without informing the court or the relatives of the people who are buried in what they consider the land that they own. They're arguing that the land and those bodies belong to the Housing Opportunities Commission, and therefore they can do whatever they want to do with them. And if this sounds familiar to you, that's because in 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott decision that Blacks have no rights that whites are bound to respect. So that is what we're fighting now. These people have gone back to Dred Scott and said, not only do you not own the land that you fought for and that you sacrificed for, you don't even own the bodies that you put in the ground. You don't own your mother, you don't own your father. We own them, and we can do whatever we want to do with them, and you have no rights. You have no rights. So this is a battle that is one that we really can't lose, because this precedence that's going to be set is going to be far reaching. It's going to go beyond burial grounds to other areas of our lives where people are going to say, you do not have any rights to whatever it is that we hold sacred. So again, I'm asking everyone to please come to Annapolis on October 6th. The hearing will start at 9 a.m. And we have a bus that we're renting to take people from Bethesda, from Macedonia Baptist Church to Annapolis. If you're interested, please get in touch with us. Sign up to take the Freedom Bus down to Annapolis. We're going to provide lunch. We're going to provide transportation. We've got music. We've got African dancers. We are going to go there and we're going to present our community. And so again, I just want to thank UNIA for this opportunity. And I'm hoping so much that we can all come together as a community and make a very, brilliant as well as courageous statement. We're also going to have a press conference after the hearing. And we'd love, obviously, for UNIA to play a major role in the press conference after historic appeal hearing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Marsha, for that presentation. And that's the early part. You know, there's so much to be said about this cemetery and what has happened historically.
Mhm.
It'll take quite a few hours or maybe days to continue with this. We do know from history, the history in slavery, how African people were treated. And it's no surprise, I would say, that, you know, there would be a burial ground where they would be dumping people, unwanted bodies that are no longer useful to them, treat them like, you know, just so much trash. And that was prior to African people taking that same ground and, you know, those put their loved ones in because that was the only place that was available to them. So it's important that we do listen to you carefully, that we do hear your words, and that with empathy, we strongly support you. And I can tell you that the UNIA ACL, especially Division 330, who is the division that is here within, or what do you call the constituency of the division, which is DC and environs. We have to take our hand and hold on to yours in solidarity.
Amen.
Because we mean business. We mean our voices will be heard. You can be assured of that.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you.
I will go to Robert. Someone has entered success. Who, if you can identify yourself, yeah.
I'm a Jeanette Carson, if you can hear me.
Okay, all right, Jeanette. All right, just checking.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
I thought it was Dr. Julie, but fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being on. All right, Robert. We'll listen to your presentation at this point.
Well, first things first, it's always tough to follow Marsha. You know, it's kind of like by the time I get on, like, you know, people forget all about me and they're
Oh
like,
yeah, no.
So, but Marsha, you know, hit all the points. But if I can add on, this is very important for several reasons. One of which is because a cemetery are reminders of communities that once lived there. See, we have to remember that post-Civil War and post-emancipation, we're talking about people who had less than nothing, forget nothing, they had less than nothing. And by the turn of the century, they had established thriving farms. They had established a school. They established not one, but 2 baseball teams, many of which played in the Negro Leagues. And in fact, River Road, for some of the research that we have done already from our first exhibit, Plans to Prosper You, River Road was a major stop on the Negro League baseball circuit. You know, so much so that we have pictures, you know, of Negro League baseball stars actually taking pictures and playing in River Road. We also have to remember the skill that the men had in masonry, working the granite quarries, and how, as Harvey Matthews even mentioned, that the train would come and take the men into Potomac to build up the homes in Potomac, many of which can still be seen today. And you can admire that stone masonry, that craftsmanship. So we have to remember that displacement happens in waves, because displacement doesn't just happen all at once. It happens in waves. And we have to remember the first wave that took place in River Road of displacement happened when they started putting in sewage lines and mandating that every home must have indoor plumbing. Now, I want to be clear, indoor plumbing by itself, in and of itself, is not a bad thing. However, when you are charging Black people a higher water utility bill than their white counterparts, and we have to remember, this is the 1930s. We have to remember, this was the Great Depression that was going on at this time period. So when you start charging people higher water utility bills, then you do then you move on to the next phase. The next phase is you start charging tax liens. Where, okay, fine, you can't pay this, we'll charge a tax lien on your property. If you can't pay the property, if you can't pay the tax lien, then we can take your home. The next phase is taking the school. You know, someone said it best where they said, like, when schools start being shut down, that is the decline of civilization. And it's very important that when they took the school away to build that radio tower, which the county is still profiting of to this very day, you are pretty much making it harder for Black children to read and write. It's already bad enough that we get a colonized education as is. But when you even take away a school that can help develop the character necessary to maintain these farms, to teach, to even have the opportunity to teach intergenerational wealth, you are pretty much trying to speed up the decline of a community. And when that fails, that is when you bring in the violence. That is when you bring out the Ku Kluxers. See, what a lot of people may or may not know is that Montgomery County had active chapters of the Ku Klux Klan throughout Montgomery County. In addition to River Road, you had places like Emery Grove and Gaithersburg suffer blackout nights from the Ku Klux Klan. You had like Kengar and Scotland and Tobytown, and just to name a few. And then by the time the 60s come around, what we call New Moses is already starting to be desecrated to build what is Westwood Towers in a parking lot. Now, let's fast forward to 2021, when HOC decided that they are going to sell part of what we call New Moses. See, per Maryland law, and just to provide context here, if an agency is going to sell property that either used to be a cemetery or still in use as burial property, they have to do two things. One is that they have to go through the court to petition a sale. The other thing they must do, they have to contact descendants. And now, under Maryland law, a descendant, you either have to have a physical affiliation, i.e., you have family that are buried in that cemetery, or you must have a cultural affiliation with that burial property. We are in a unique position because not only did we have people who, descendant community, who have a physical connection to that cemetery. For example, you have Daryl Cuba, who, if I recall correctly, is either the grandson or great-grandson of Cleveland Clipper, who donated his house to become Macedonia Baptist Church. You have Nanette Hunter, who was the thrice great niece of Cora and Jeremiah Botts, who were buried in New Moses. And you had Montani Wallace, whose husband was a descendant of the Warren and Lewis families, who were documented as being buried in New Moses. So we had the physical affiliation part. And on the cultural affiliation part, we had two prongs. One was the church, because we have to remember in 2019, Montgomery County, by its own admission, and as Judge Smith noted in her decision, that the county even acknowledged that Macedonia Baptist Church is the sole surviving physical and cultural institution as a reminder of the once thriving River Road African American community. The county itself acknowledged that. The second part is because BACC, because we're fighting to protect and stop an ongoing desecration of the cemetery and amplifying the history of the cemetery and the community that once lived around it, show that we have that cultural connection. And we provided evidence, the fact that newspapers going back to the 30s and the 40s, even the 50s, showing that by that point, the cemetery was being called Moses Macedonia African Cemetery. So even though that part of New Moses was affiliated with White's Tabernacle, the community was referring it as reference to the Macedonia Baptist Church, which makes perfect sense considering the fact that the founding pastor of Macedonia Baptist Church, Reverend William Mason, is buried in New Moses. And so when Judge Smith rendered her decision, she not only noted the desecration and that the court cannot ignore the fact that there are bodies buried here, But she also said towards the end of her decision that it is the high opinion of this court that Montgomery County and HOC in particular cease and desist any action lest they run afoul of potential constitutional violations. In layman's terms, she was telling Montgomery County HOC to knock it off.
Mhm.
And what did HOC do in their arrogance?
Mhm.
They decided, no, we're going to file an appeal. Which is interesting because the whole basis of their appeal is, well, we need to think about affordable housing. And what's funny is that Judge Smith in her decision said if their concern is affordable housing, there are other areas throughout the county that HOC can easily build affordable housing on and not desecrate a cemetery in the process.
Mhm.
They completely want to forget that Judge Smith told there are other parcels, other places not even affiliated or even close to the cemetery that they
Mhm.
could be doing this. It's not about affordable housing. See, this is about what I like to call the bestiality of racial capitalism.
Mhm.
It is a bestiality that seeks to derive profit by any means necessary from the most marginalized. And the
Mhm.
most marginalized in this case are the dead, because they cannot speak up for themselves, they cannot defend themselves, they cannot fight for themselves. So it is up to us as recognized as cultural descendants to take up that fight.
Mhm.
But this is why the appeal and why we must have as big a show out as necessary. Because we must show that it is filled with our supporters. So that way, as Marsha said, that the judges know that how serious this is to us.
Mhm.
But also, and this is just my take on it, because I do not want to give any of people who have been against us, who have been antagonistic, any room in the courthouse that day. And I'm gonna name names and organizations. One organization that has been antagonistic towards us from the get-go has been the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland.
Mhm.
They have been antagonistic, but then again, it is the worst kept secret that a lot of these Black politicians are in the hands of white developers. And the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland is no different. Let me give an example. One member of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland has been Delegate Pamela Queen.
Mm.
She came to the rallies that we had. And I remember the rally she came to at Macedonia Baptist Church in November of 2017. She shows up there, says, I'm going to do everything I can to help. She proposes a bill that would give money to NGOs, white NGOs for that matter, who don't even have an idea about Black burial culture or custom.
Mhm.
We were against that bill because she did not get the descendant community involved at all. And fortunately, we were able to get that bill killed.
Mhm.
The next person who I'm glad lost because he did a stupid thing running for jumping in the county council race late was Delegate Al Carr, now soon to be former Delegate Al Carr.
Yes. Yes.
Now, we sought common cause with him because he had called out HOC on their illegal practices and their corruption. So we thought, hey, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. Let's reach out to him to see if he would be willing to introduce a bill that we write. So that way it truly not only protects African burial grounds, but it penalizes those who desecrate them from either the public or the private sector. So he says, okay, I'll introduce a bill, but it has to be Maryland-wide. It can't just be a bill for Montgomery County. So we said, cool. We do that. We address the fact that, and we even reach out to other descendant communities that are having problems, like the Laurel Cemetery Project in East Baltimore, for instance. So we wrote this bill statewide. The last minute, Al Carr reintroduces Pam Queen's bill, but says you can have amendments to it. So then we testify, we alternate our bill to make them the amendments, and we testify, and we make it very clear we are only supporting the bill with amendments. If this bill passes without amendments, we will be against it. They had the bill without amendments, and it was very clear, even from the testimony, that those who introduced that bill were deferring more so to white developers and so-called pseudo-historians like Eileen McGuckian. Then, and this is even more disappointing, this hurts me personally, we had Delegate Gabriel Acevedo, who is in DSA with me, who is very strong on police accountability. And he was talking to us in private about supporting things what he can do. So we asked him if he would be willing to introduce a bill, the same bill that we wrote for our car, to reintroduce this bill. And he said, sure, he'll do it. And then at the last minute, he says, before I can introduce this bill, you have to talk to the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. Even though we made him fully aware about how the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland has been totally antagonistic towards us. But the reason why that is important is because word on the street is some members of the LBCM are going to try to be in attendance.
Yes.
See, for them, it's a win-win opportunity for them. Because if the Court of Appeals upholds the circuit court's decision, which I'm confident that they will, because HOC is just simply rehashing the same arguments that didn't hold weight in the circuit court. This is what the LBCM is going to do. They're going to pat us on the back, saying we always believed and supported you, but meanwhile, behind closed doors, they're going to meet with whoever's the housing and planning departments in their districts and work with them to figure out how they can either get rid of that law or weaken that law.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Court of Appeals overturns the circuit court's decision, for them, it's business as usual. I do not want the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland to be in that courtroom. They want to watch this decision so dang bad, they can watch it in the overflow room. Let them get a taste of what it's like to be on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Another group, another so-called Black group, and notice the air quotes, that has been antagonistic has been the NAACP, or as I like to call, the Do Nothing Without the Permission of Caucasian People Association. They've been antagonistic to us to the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've been protesting, they didn't show.
Mm-hmm.
We submit testimony, oral and written, they don't show. But when they want to have a meeting with people on the council, they want to go, I'm tired. I want this issue resolved. Mm-hmm. And I remember at that one NAACP meeting, I asked the president of the Montgomery County chapter of NAACP, why are you tired? Because I haven't seen you at a protest. I haven't seen you at a rally. I haven't seen you when we testify before the council. I haven't seen you anywhere. So why are you tired? And what gives you the right to be tired? And what is funny is that the NAACP in Montgomery County is so tied up to the status quo. Mm-hmm. They refuse to speak out. Mm-hmm. And another organization that has been antagonistic towards us, another so-called Black Front group, has been the Lynching Commission.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Lynching Commission here in Montgomery County, with so-called Black people, many of whom say they're descendants of other descendant communities in Montgomery County, but every time the issue of Moses and BACC gets brought up, they shut it down. Mm-hmm. They shut it down completely. And it's people, and it's responses like that. And I know this may piss off some people here, and I don't, but am I lying when I say this? When I say that the DC Negro, the DC Native Negro is the epitome of the house Negro. Mm-hmm. Because they were so busy wanting scraps from the master's table instead of having their own table. They would rather fight for peanuts instead of taking over the whole dang farm. Mm-hmm. They would rather sell their soul as long as it meant they got the 30 pieces of silver. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is because of folks like that why one former African trade union organizer once said, when fighting for Africans, I have to use one hand, because I have to use the other hand to fight Africans who want to fight me for fighting for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are the forces that we are up against. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me that the ancestors are on our side. And let me tell you why. Because the more they dig up, the more people realize that we're telling the truth. Mm-hmm. The more swamp water they have to take out and pump out, the more swamp water fills back up. Mm-hmm. And they can't lay down any cement. They can't do anything, and they are losing money. that they have to take out loan after loan after loan after loan, and they still can't do anything. And even people who may not even be sympathized with BACC, when they heard that Mark Elrich and 1784 Holdings lost Bones, even they were shocked. And now they're realizing, oh snap, BACC. Maybe they were telling the truth all these years. And so it is very important that whether you are UNIA, whether you are 5%er, whether you are Nation of Islam, New Black Panther Party, African Panthers, whether you're part of the reparations movement, you must come and be in attendance on this day. You can come on the bus, you can drive there separately, but we must have a strong showing. You must show this Court of Appeals and the HOC lawyers and the HOC that they will not, that you cannot claim ownership of a Black cemetery that was stolen from the River Road community, and that the rightful owners of Macedonia Baptist Church. And I find it interesting that in the heart of the Confederacy, in places like Florida, and places like Georgia, and South Carolina, and Louisiana, these places are able to return Black cemeteries to the Black church that's still in the area. But you mean to tell me that Montgomery County, supposedly one of the wealthiest counties and what is called the wealthiest state in the United States, cannot return a cemetery to a Black church they acknowledge is the last bastion of the River Road community? And the reason why they don't want to do it is because they know that if they turn that land back to Macedonian Baptist Church, we are going to turn that into a site of liberation. We're going to turn that into a site of Black power in Montgomery County. Yes. We're going to turn that into a site where people can come and plan liberation movements and reparations movements in Montgomery County and beyond.
Amen.
And so it is very important that people here on this call listening in come to Annapolis, because the battle for justice is there.
Yes.
No, I'm on the
Come
Zoom
here
call.
and show.
I've been in Obi last live, but I couldn't get out there. The John Coltrane thing, but no, I'm at this.
Sister Nkechi, can you put yourself on mute, please?
Oops.
Thank you. But basically, simply put, come to Annapolis. Come to a place, the state's capital. I used to work in Annapolis, and I swore to God once that I would never set foot again in Annapolis. But I am setting foot there so that way I can see justice be served, so I can see justice prevail. So I can say to my property one day that in the face of white supremacy, truth and was met with truth and justice. And so with that, I yield the floor back to Baba Mosey. And I hope that I was able to do justice.
Stop. Robert, that was a red herring you threw out when you opened up. You know that you're quite complimentary when it comes to dealing with this matter after Dr. Martin. That was great.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I mean, I can't say much more. I mean, you've given us some history. You've given us your position. You've given us an appeal to be there in solidarity. I mean, we can't ask for more. And thank you very much, my brother. Yes, indeed. Well, Sister Marsha, I don't know how you're going to follow Robert.
So before you go there, Baba Mosey, before
yes.
you go back to Dr. Marsha, I just want to say to my brother, you know, really appreciate how you call out the Black Yorugus, man.
Yes.
Because sometimes we as African people are so desperate to get white Yorugu off our backs, we tend to sell out the real deal, which is your brother and sister. And that's a serious piece. So I'm glad you spoke truth to power. We in the UNIA are very familiar with that. We're very familiar historically with brothers and sisters who have sold out, you know, the UNIA, sold out the leadership. And it is important that we call that out, particularly in the public now, in these days and times, because truth is the way to righteousness. So feel no way, brother. We got too many black Urugus, and I'm giving them a break by even calling them black, but Urugus who are running around doing the bidding for the oppressor that has killed their kith and kin. And that's very, very important. That goes all the way back. We have to address that because that's what Garvey taught us was the enemy within.
That's right.
And that's why internal repair and reparations is so critical. So thank you for that. And I wanted to just stop to really commend you. You move like a African encyclopedia, brother. You know, I don't know. I didn't see you look down at no notes or nothing. And you were rattling off things that I'm very impressed with. And so that gives us hope for the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Baba Senghor. Your words mean a lot. And it's very important because I'm sick and tired of house Negroes. I'm just going to be very clear. And for me, and this is an approach that I appreciate that groups like the Black Panthers and Republic of New Africa had. You know, one Panther said the reward for counter-revolution is death. You know, and the thing that we have to remember is this, is that when you're in a state of war, I should be able to look to my brother and look to my sister and trust that we're marching forward together. If I'm marching forward, but every now and then I gotta look over my shoulder to make sure that you're not trying to stab me in the back or, you know, everything, that's a problem. And for me, I'm so sick and tired of it because these house Negroes, the Black Urugu, the Inyezi, they're so quick to spit on us in the trenches, but yet they're the first to take advantage of the benefits that we fought for. Clarence Thomas is a prime example of that. You know, he barely did anything during the civil rights movement, yet he was the first to take advantage of affirmative action. He was the first to take advantage of so many opportunities, and look where he's at. Supreme Court justice screwing us over, period. And there are so many other Black Urugu that take advantage of that. And it's time for us to really put our foot down and say enough is enough. If you're not going to be in the trenches with us, whether it's on reparations, you ain't getting no reparations. If you are going to be against us fighting for Moses Cemetery or Black African cemeteries, then guess what? You don't come to the ceremonies. Don't you know? When we get it back, I'm going to end, and then I know we have to open it up for discussion. But when we get Moses Macedonia Cemetery back, and I say Moses Macedonia Cemetery destroyed for now, but restored tomorrow.
Yes.
I do not want any of these people coming to the celebration rally.
Right.
I do not want to see them. I don't want them to take part in the festivities. If anything, if they do show up, and this may be the first time I may interrupt Marsha or Segu when they speak, I will leap up on the stage and I will say, I want to let y'all finish, but I'm going to ask the following people to either leave or you may be escorted out by the UNIA. You can either go peacefully or you can leave or you can be escorted out of here. I don't want you all here. You are counter-revolutionaries, and counter-revolutionaries make me sick to my stomach.
Amen.
Yes, indeed.
Amen.
You know, that kind of passion is what we all need when it comes to dealing with those who are treacherous. The treacherous ones among us. And you know, we have quite a bit. And they, you know, they come to us for votes. They come around and you know, they smile and say, we're going to do things for you all together. But what's their aim? You know, I keep saying this all the time. We've got more people in Congress, in legislative bodies, all over this country than we had 30 years ago. And we're marking time. There are some improvements here and there. But where are those voices that used to come out of Harlem?
Yes.
In the legislature, in the Congress, voices. You know, we want these people back. We've got too many people. Well, sometimes I think maybe it has to do with the press suppressing Black voices. And these people may be saying things and they're being ignored. They're not being published. And so that among us in the Black population, we will think that these people are doing nothing for us. I don't know. But surely they can come to us in the way we are and say the things needed for us to hear, to understand that they're working for us if they're working for us.
Mhm,
It's just too many of them.
mhm.
And the few that have their voices out there, money comes from everywhere to destroy them, to get them out of their position. So we know that we have treacherous people among us because some of them are still there and they're not being heard. They say nothing. They're being used to attract votes from us. Anyway,
And to add to
we're
your
here
point,
to deal with the Moses Cemetery issue.
Yeah, I didn't mean to light a fire like that. You know, we kind of lit a fire, but you know, sometimes it's good to burn up all of the evil energy.
Yes, indeed. Yes, and let me see. Well, it looks like we're not gonna get our sister on early tonight.
You were about to go to Sister Marsha, though.
Yeah.
You were about to go
Well,
back to
if
Sister.
you need to add anything there, Sister Marsha,
Well, yeah,
anything
well,
that needs to.
let me just say that now you understand why I call Robert the Lion.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know, and I think that that is the kind of passion, as you know, Baba Mosi, that we have in BACC.
Yeah.
Because people are very passionate about the issue of land, We are fighting for land. This is not, I don't want to just say simply about a cemetery, but this was a whole community that they wiped out. And the cemetery was, of course, a part of that community, but they wiped out an entire community. For example, we talked, Robert mentioned Harvey Matthews. And Harvey Matthews' family lived on River Road. And if you go to Whole Foods on River Road, Harvey Matthews' family owned the Whole Foods area, that the whole area that we call that Whole Foods, where the strip mall is now. His family owned that. And they were targets of the Ku Klux Klan, where they had the night out, where they had a lookout person on River Road that would let them know when the Klan was about to come down River Road. And the Klan would come down River Road 2 or 3 times a week, and the Black families would have to huddle in the middle of their homes, praying for the Klan not to break down their doors and knock out their windows. And they were trying to protect themselves. This small enclave of Black people on River Road. And one time the Klan decided that they were going to go into Brother Harvey's house, drag out his father, beat him almost to death in front of his family in order to force him to sell that land. Well, who does that land belong to right now? It belongs to Amazon. And so one of our targets of BACC is to go to, we're going to file a suit against Amazon. We want that land back. That land was sold to Amazon. Amazon bought that land for $60 million. Brother Harvey talks about the fact that he is still cutting grass at almost 80 years old. Almost 80 years old. Is cutting grass for other people. That was land his father had sacrificed to buy on River Road. And now his descendants are still doing manual labor while this land is being sold to white folks for $60 million. Well, who else was on River Road? Well, as it turns out, the Marriott Corporation started on River Road. It was called Hot Shops back in those days. And Brother Harvey talks about the fact that Mr. Marriott used to fly his helicopter almost right across the street from Moses Cemetery. And the kids would all run out to the helicopter or whatever to see Mr. Marriott get out of his helicopter. The Marriott Corporation is now worth $60 billion. $60 billion, started out on River Road with all those Black homes there, $60 billion. Brother Harvey is cutting grass. Mr. Marriott just built a new international conference center on Wisconsin Avenue. The corporation is worth $60 billion. Where is our money? Where is our money? One of the reasons why these people are fighting outside of the cultural issues so hard not to transfer the land from the cemetery to Macedonia. It was, how much is that land worth now? Now, in the mid 1700s, 1800s, the reason why they used that land as a cemetery was because it was agriculturally unproductive. It was worth nothing. They would have loved to have given that land away. Fast forward to 2022, the land that we're fighting for now is worth over $100 million. $100 million. And so when I told a legislator that we want that land transferred to Macedonia because that land has our blood underneath the soil, we are demanding that land back. She laughed at me. She said, "Do you know how much that land is worth?" I said, "Absolutely do. And we want it back because that is our money. That's our money. That's our blood. We want it back." So we are fighting a reparations battle in that corner of the world, right? And we've got families who we can connect to land spaces, and we've got people in our church who are underneath the soil. We are demanding all of it back, all of it. We want all of that land back. We want all of the wealth back, and we are prepared to fight for it.
And if I may add on, so when we started, first, the entire county, like the county council, the county executive, they were denying the existence not only of Moses Cemetery, but they were also denying that there ever was once an African-American community on River Road, even though common sense would have told people, why is it in this part of Lily White Bethesda there's an all-black church,
Right.
So what the county council did back in 2017, they hired a historical consulting group called the Otter Group to essentially do a hit job. To basically go, just do a hit job and just say, hey, prove that there's no cemetery here. The Ira group came back and said, not only is that a cemetery, but they demanded that the county delineate that entire area because of the fact that there was recorded that there were burials. It was community burial property that was taking place there. And that's why they even said in their study, it made it easier for White's Tabernacle when they came in to formalize a cemetery because it was already being used as burial grounds anyway.
Exactly.
And what did the county do? Did they take his advice? Did they listen to the Otter Group? I don't even think they even read the study, if I can be totally honest with you. They declined to do it. In fact, the head of the Otter Group, to his credit, testified on our behalf at our trial and said right there in front of HOC's lawyer and in front of the judge, he said, I told the county to delineate the entire area and they refused to do so. He even said, what was the point of asking me to do a historical study if you're not going to do anything with it? He even said, it looked like, looking back now, they were trying to pay me to do a hit job on a historic community, which is something in conscience as a historian I cannot do. So I give him credit for doing the right thing despite the council, the planning board, the developer telling him to say that this cemetery never existed. So I give the head of the Otter Group credit where credit is due in that regard. And even then too, on the developer side, one of their historians, I'm not going to mention his name, but he used to work with us.
David Rattenstein.
Yeah, in his study,
whatever.
In his study, he said that was community burial property. So you had not one, but two different historians, including one who was working for the developers, saying this is community burial property. But this is where the power of the streets, the power of protest comes in.
Right.
Because not only have we chased away 3 developers, we had Equity One, there was Regency, and Charger Ventures. But because we protested, one of the executive director of Park and Planning, Michael Riley, he's gone. Gwen Wright, who started this mess, who ironically started this movement,
is gone.
She's gone.
Right.
And word on the street is it was because of our exhibit, the recent one we did, the bridge that carried us over, where we exposed the devil. where she basically was trying to deny this in the cemetery and even instituted commissioners to look the other way when they went into the area.
Mhm.
She's going to be leaving soon.
Right.
And now, one of the main architects, Casey Anderson,
Mhm.
he's under fire right now. And he was one who, even prior to Moses Cemetery, under his tenure of the planning board, gentrification in Montgomery County, or as I like to call it, domestic imperialism, where Black people were being pushed out under his tenure.
Mhm.
But even so, when we notified this was a cemetery, he said it was a park and
Mhm.
nothing more, nothing less.
Mhm.
Despite even the state of Maryland registering that cemetery. But like I said, this is where the power of protest comes in. And that is why it is very important. And was ironic when we won our court case. And Marsha, you may remember this. All of a sudden, HOC was saying, well, if we're going to transfer that land, then we're going to have ground penetrating radar and cadaver dogs, which is something we were clamoring for since the beginning. We were saying ground penetrating radar. They said no. Okay, let's do cadaver dogs. If you're concerned about cost, then they said no. But then the minute the court renders a decision in our favor, that's when they said, well, before we do any land transfers, this is what we need to do. At this point, as far from where I'm standing, that ship has sailed. That is land.
Mhm.
That is our land.
Mhm.
And we will get it, and we will get it back.
Mhm.
Because after a certain point, these same politicians, and I think I know the politician you were talking to when you mentioned you want that land back, Marsha. I could be wrong. I think I probably know who that person is. They're going to eat crow. And
Mhm.
if they come around the festivities when we do the memorial and museum and sacred space, I want her out. I don't want her there.
I agree with you, Robert. I totally agree with you. And one of the last things we'll say, not last things, but once we finish with October 6th, once we finish organizing for October 6th, you're right. I mean, we're cleaning house at the planning board. We've got Michael Riley, who is now, we had protests in front of the planning board. And those were a little, Baba Mosey came to those protests. And I mean, they had their guns out there. I mean, because the planning board, their police officers carry guns. And there's a portion of Moses Cemetery that is under control of the planning board. And a couple of times we've gone to the cemetery and they bring their guns out, right? And so we went to the planning board and, it was a little scary. And we processed it, I think, out there for like 2 months, right, Robert? Maybe 2 months.
Yep, 2 months.
And we were able to get rid of Michael Riley, who was the one who was saying that, this is not a cemetery. So he's gone now. We've been able to get rid of Gwen Wright, who was the director of the planning section of Parks and Planning. She's gone. And now our next target is really Casey Anderson, who is such a devilish character. Because when we first started going to the planning board, whenever we would go there, he would always call the police on us. And before we would even walk into the planning board, you would see the police outside the planning board staging and exercising how they were going to treat us once we entered the planning board. And they would surround us with their riot gear, and they press their bodies against us. And anyway, it was all this intimidation stuff that they would do. But now Casey Anderson was the one who would call the police on us when we go to the planning board. And he knew, like everyone else knows, if you call the police on Black protesters, there's a good chance that someone's going to get hurt. We kept writing to Mark Elrich saying, Mark, someone's going to get hurt. You must stop this. Mark, of course, wouldn't do anything because that's who Mark Elrich is. He was supporting these racists. But now, I think it was an Inspector General's report. Was that right, Robert? Came out showing that the same Casey Anderson was actually, not selling alcohol, but using, I think, funds to buy alcohol and for the planning board, and then giving alcohol to employees of the planning board who were then driving home. I mean, these are criminals we're dealing with. These are bloody criminals we're dealing with. And at the same time, they had the nerve to call the police out on us. So we're now demanding the resignation or the firing of Casey Anderson. And we want in the next couple of weeks, else we're putting protests outside the planning board again. We want him gone. And then next, one second, and then next, once October 6th is gone, we're sending a letter to the Department of Justice. And we're asking for a criminal investigation of Mark Elrich and all these criminals in Montgomery County who knew there were bones being found in that cemetery and still allowed the developer to continue to dig up our bones. And now Mark Elrich and the rest of these criminals in Montgomery County are saying, we can't find the bones.
So
We don't know what happened to the human remains that we found. They just disappeared. They all
so-
belong in jail. They
I'm,
all
so, I'm
belong-
sorry, Marsha, that's a good point. And that was what I was going to ask. Could you all speak to that, you know, the missing bones, so to speak, and Michael Blakely's involvement? Could you speak to that just so, because you all are excellent at giving us a wide view of all of the areas where we've been hoodwinked and come at. Could you just, y'all speak to that?
You want to go first, Robert?
Sure. So so to provide context with Dr. Michael Blakey, he's been working with us since 2017, 2018.
Mhm.
And reason why we reached out to him, because in addition to the work he did in New York City, he's also a well-regarded professor at George Mason University, and he is a phenomenal bioarchaeologist, forensic anthropologist of international renown. And so around 2020, he came forward, he actually came forward this year, but he said in 2020, around July, he received a call and an email from Mark Elrich saying that they found bones in parcel 242. And this is very important because publicly, Mark Elrich was going around the county saying there's no bones, BACC's being delusional. There's no way that there's connected to burials to 242, which I kind of find ironic because as I mentioned earlier, the Audrey group mentioned that there were burials on 242. So, and he was on the council when that study was released, but I digress. So he asked Michael Blakey, what do I need to do? So Michael Blakey gives him some steps. First, you need to shut down construction. You need to tape off that area. So that way, tape off that area. 3, me and my team need to come to investigate the area and investigate the bone samples. And then I'm going to run tests to see if these are human bones or if these are animal bones. And depending on the result, I'm going to be the one to tell the community because the community doesn't trust you.
Right.
The community does not trust you. So if I'm the one doing the report and the studies, and if I find that if these are indeed human bones, I'm going to tell them. If they're not human bones, I'm going to tell them. And they're going to trust me because I built up that trust with them for the past several years. So a couple of days go by, and Mark says, okay, I'm going to secure the bones, and then I'm going to send the samples to you so you and your team can do what you guys do. Michael Blakey says, okay, I'll let me know when they're en route. A couple of days go by. He doesn't hear anything. He calls up Mark Elrich and sends a letter saying, hey, what's up with the bones? What is the situation? Are they en route? Can you let me know? When am I going to receive them so I can run the test in my lab? And Michael Blakey, he's the type of guy that he's been at this for so long, he can just look and tell if it's a human or an animal bone from over a mile away. And that's when Mark Elrich tells him, well, we lost the bones. And when Michael Blakey heard that, he said that is unacceptable. It is intolerable. And he said, and quite frankly, it is very suspicious that you're saying that you're telling everyone around the county that these aren't human bones, but yet you lost them. And more importantly to the fact, what we found interesting is what was sent to quote unquote Towson University, the person that they were sent to, that person apparently has such a bad reputation in the forensic world as someone who does not follow proper protocol when preserving bones or studying bones, and has a track record of losing bones and other forensic artifacts in the past. So this is what really makes this thing really look suspect. And so when we got that affidavit, this is about a couple months ago, around like mid-July, our attorneys sent a letter to Mark Elrich saying that you better find the bones and provide whatever archaeological reports, and you have 48 hours to do so. And they didn't respond.
Mhm.
So at this point, what we've been doing, and this is where I wish Reverend Julianne, because she's a lawyer as well, because we said, we gotta get the DOJ involved.
Yes.
Because it is very clear that yes, the local authorities are going to provide cover for Mark Elrich. The state some of the state officers have shown they're going to provide cover. The only place we can go is the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. And so what we have done is that we have written a letter showing the timeline. And what is beautiful about the FOIA request that we have done so far is, for that time frame, we uncovered over 300 emails where there was even talk between the developers and Mark Elrich showing that we found human remains.
Human bones.
They said they found human bones in those emails.
Mhm.
Let me repeat. The 1784 holdings, the one just said that we found human bones. And instead of stopping construction, he let the construction continue.
Mhm.
So this right here is a travesty of great renown. Even Emperor Nero and Caligula will be looking at Mark Elrich like, we could learn a thing or two from you. But this is where we're at. So we're getting ready to file this letter with the DOJ to launch a federal investigation into not only Mark Elrich and the county executive's office, but also the state's attorney's office, the planning board, the 1784 holdings, because they knew. And see, the beautiful thing that, and I'm going to quote my Generation Z brothers and sisters, is we have the receipts. You admitted you had human remains in custody. You admitted that these were tombstones and funerary objects you were finding. And instead of stopping construction and doing the right thing and going to Mark Elrich saying, look, we can't continue with this. You need to transfer that land back to the Black church, or better yet, because we have this parcel, we're going to give it to them. And instead of doing the right thing, they decided in the name of God and prophet that we're going to continue with this construction.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't continue with the construction because of the swamp water, which again proves that something that we've already proven, that was swampland.
Mm-hmm.
They can't build anything because that swamp water keeps coming back. And I love it when it rains, because when it rains, that just adds more to it. And it means they can't build or touch it for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that is the ancestors' way. That is God's way of saying, I am not fond of ugly. I am not too fond of cute either. And had you turned that land back over to the church, you wouldn't be in this situation losing all this money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's why the battle cry, one of the battle cries is Moses Macedonia Cemetery, destroyed today, but it will be restored tomorrow.
Right.
And with the lawsuit that we had, it set a precedent, because now other descendant communities throughout the country are looking at that lawsuit with interest, like how can we apply that to what we're going through, whether we're in Texas or whether we're in Oklahoma or Nebraska or Indiana or Florida for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Robert gave a very comprehensive summary of what we're going through. I mean, Mark Elrich literally traveled throughout the county calling us names. I mean, literally calling us names and talking about us like, we were some wild-eyed, crazies that were, saying that there were bones being found and how ridiculous that was. At the same time, he was calling Michael Blakey at night saying, we're finding bones. And if you saw the video that we showed at the beginning, there's this one picture of an archaeologist and he's crushing something under his boot and he's got something in his hand, and we had circled the boot and we circled the hand. Those were bones in his hands. Those were bones in his hands. And we would be at the gate because we're not allowed in the cemetery. So we have to stay at the gate of the McDonald's parking lot to overlook into the cemetery. and we would see the bones, and we would start yelling and screaming, and they would literally find a bone and then crush it under their boots, just to say, we're in charge here. We're in charge of your ancestors, right? So this is like one of the most atrocious human rights violations, which is the reason why I think we should also go to The Hague. Because particularly in Old Moses, these were not American citizens. These were citizens from independent African nations who were kidnapped and brought to the United States. And despite the fact that Europeans like to call them slaves, they were African nationals who had been kidnapped. And so we need to go to an international, like to The Hague. And we need to have these people tried under international law, because these are war criminals that we're dealing with here. And we need to make sure that every single instrument is used to bring these people to justice.
Thank you, Sister Marsha. Well, it's now it's that time. It's 8:31, and it's almost closing time. So I'm going to open up to anyone who has a question or who would like to make a comment regarding what was said earlier by Dr. Marsha or Brother Robert.
So this is Sister Nikichi. I just want to say Ashe. Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much
Thank you.
for your hard and very, very, very consistent work over the years with respect to this very, very pertinent and critical issue. And I agree. I think that the rest of the country is looking at what happens here and is using, or is going to be using, the model that you all have emanated in respect to all of this in their with atrocities in their own backyards. I like the idea of also in terms of going to the international sphere. Everything that you're saying is right on time. And I just, you don't see me there around, et cetera, but know that people are watching. Okay.
Thank
And people are saying right on. And yeah, Mr. Stubblefield, my brother, I had not heard you before. Wow, you on fire. I said, yeah. I mean, yes, So again, I just want to really thank you and commend you for everything that you brought to this issue. I don't live that far from there. I live in Chevy Chase, DC, and it was not too long ago, maybe just a couple of years ago, that I found out that when my daughter went to elementary school and where she played in the playground, Lafayette Park and Lafayette School and all like that, was Black folks' property. I didn't even know that. And I'm living in the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? So again, these caskets are being opened, and we will win. Victory is certain. Keep up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Nkechi. I just want to say, it's definitely great having you involved, having you here, especially with the reparations education project, because the battle for Black cemeteries and reparations goes hand in hand, in my opinion. And so, because part of it is land justice, and there is no power without land. In fact, a lot of things too is that as Baba Sangor once mentioned a while ago, a lot of Black communities within the DMV were very interconnected. In some places like Montgomery County and even parts of DC, you didn't go to these places unless you're going to one of the Black enclaves, in these areas, or you worked here. And Chevy Chase is a prime example, especially that part of Chevy Chase. In fact, a lot of people I know on the Montgomery County side, that part was a sundown town, But so they established what became known as Belmont Park. And Belmont Park was a Black area where their servants lived. But they saw how popular that the servants made Belmont Park. So you know what they did? They took over that and pushed out their own servants, for that matter. And so this is, so here we are. Even at one point, Georgetown,
Right.
in fact, if you don't know her, you should. But Lisa Fager of the Mount Union Zion Cemetery, female band cemetery, Georgetown used to be a predominantly Black area. In fact, there was a time Georgetown was part of Montgomery County, you know, and you know, look what what happening there. They're fighting to stop desecration in the city from trying to develop around that cemetery,
Mhm.
you know. And so this battle right here really shows why we must connect each other to our struggles. We must be aware of what's going on, so that way we can look to see what tactics work, what tactics didn't work, or what can be improved upon, and how can we adapt those to these times.
Mhm.
So, and one of the things that just happened, in fact, the Chevy Chase Historical Society, you know, they actually, you know, came forward with information about things that Philadelphia is going through and other places in the DMV are going through right now. In fact, one example is the Thoroughfare, you know, which was a Black and Indigenous cemetery. That's in danger of being developed by, I think, Arlington, for that matter. It's so, you know, the Chevy Chase Historical Society, I will give them credit where credit is due. They're calling foul,
Mhm.
you know, on what's going on in Montgomery County,
Mhm.
especially because they're via their records, they're showing that there were burials going places in Moses.
Mhm. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
and in fact, yeah, the director of the Chevy Chase Historical Society just joined BACC actually. And what she's doing now is sharing the records of these terrorists who were kidnapping our ancestors. And we're now looking at you know, these two records between Bethesda and Chevy Chase, and we're looking at the human trafficking that were going on between these two areas. But more importantly, we're also looking at the current landowners in Chevy Chase who actually benefited from this system, because we're also looking at reparation actions against them as well. And so we are totally engaged now between the Chevy Chase community and the Bethesda community. And we want to know, are there people who are still alive, who are still benefiting from the blood and sweat of our people? And if they are, then I think we need to also look at them as well in terms of reparation action.
in the words of Marvin Gaye, right on, you know.
Yes. Well, and let me ask any other question. Anybody has a question or any other comment?
This is Kimberlyn Baker. I don't have a question, but I want to chime in and I want to add, it's a pleasure to first and foremost to be on the call this evening. And I really appreciate everything that I am being privy to and being a part of. Let me just add something that's taking place currently in PG County. As a matter of fact, we're talking about property that the cemetery itself and what took place. And stealing property is still taking place right now. Wealth, you know, Black folk being subjected to their properties, being subjected to foreclosure is really, really happening overwhelmingly right now. And so I just wanted to share that as well. I'm a part of a committee, Foreclosure Prevention Crisis Committee, whereby we are really trying to expose the demonic and the treachery that's taking place when it comes to these mortgage companies and these third-party lenders, and when it comes to the lawyers and the things that they're doing. And I think it just kind of brings things to a center, because what happened with Sister Marsha speaking of, with the properties being stolen from those ancestors during that period, it's still happening today. The wealth is still being stolen from us today. And I think, unfortunately, individuals who are being subjected to foreclosure, such as myself, you know, at one point in time, we feel a little afraid. We don't know what to do. But right now, I'm standing on my square. I'm pushing back because it was illegal how they did it. And I'm just determined not to allow it to go any further, and also to expose and also speak out, and also possibly invite others who this has happened to, and also be able to let them know it's nothing to be ashamed of, because if something's stolen from you, it's stolen from you. So I just wanted to add that, and I appreciate it, everything.
Yeah.
Thank
Beautiful.
You're
Sister
welcome.
Kimberly, may I ask which community this is?
Which community and the location, you mean?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Like the Largo area. I have the zip codes. I just can't speak on it right now because I don't have them in front of me. But the
Mhm.
zip codes are there. Like in one particular zip code by itself, one single zip code, there's 1,500 intent to foreclose.
Wow.
1,500 intent to foreclose.
Oh wow. The reason why I mentioned that is because it's personal to me because I actually grew up partially in Prince George's County for a little bit, out in Brandywine and in Bowie. So that's why it's kind of when I hear stuff going on in PG County, I take it a little personally because that was and I still is in some way, shape, or form a home away from home. Perhaps if it's all right with you, is it all right if I can send you my contact information or Marsha's contact information, and then
Absolutely.
a matter of fact, I'm going to drop my email in the chat right now. So
So,
I'm just
so that is exactly what I was saying too, Baba Mosi. Please have Marsha, and then let everybody know that's listening on Facebook how they can contribute. If they can't put boots on the ground, how they can make contributions, how they can purchase some of the information that we have. I think that's important to get out in these next 10 minutes of how people can help.
okay, great, awesome. So we understand that people, not everyone's boots on the ground. So one way that you can help out is by spreading the word. If you're active on social media, you can, find us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at Bethesda. We're at BETHAFR Cemetery, on both Instagram and Twitter. And you can just follow us and retweet, our stuff. That's one way you can help out. Another way you can help out is, I think everyone hates doing this, but unfortunately it's necessary. It's
Do it.
donations.
Yes.
Unfortunately, movements cost money. One way that you can donate is you can find us on Open Collective. That's opencollective.org, and you can look up Bethesda African Cemetery, and you can donate there. In fact, you can actually set up single donations. You can donate once, or you can set up recurring donations, and we have them set up like freedom fighter, grave defender, or you can make a donation via PayPal. Our PayPal is at Bethesda African Cemetery. Cemetery is CEMET, but that is our PayPal. You can donate to our PayPal that way if that is easy. Or another way, and this is something that I'm a fan of, is by sharing information. As Sister Kimberlin brought out, there's a lot of things going on in Prince George's County. Right now, one community, and this is a collective we've been in contact with, is trying to help the Lakeland community, which was destroyed to make way for College Park. One way is to help share contact information. In fact, I put my information in the chat, but I don't mind saying it out loud. The best way to reach me is by email. My email is rstubb, that's rstubb326@gmail.com. That is the best way to contact me. And I'll definitely put you in contact with the rest of the coalition in terms of in terms of the issues that are facing our communities and how best we solidarity. Because that's in fact one of the things I like about BACC is the fact we are an international organization. Case in point, one of our most powerful members was the late great Queen Mother Harriet Hines.
Yeah.
She was part of the Flatbush African Burial Grounds out in Brooklyn. And when she heard about what was going on here, she immediately reached out to us. In fact, to bring us to mention, literally a couple of days before our trial, after we won that court decision, we had the International Conference of Stolen Black Land. That was her idea. That was Harriet Hines' idea to have that conference. And one of the things she wanted to do before she untimely transitioned to the ancestral realm was that she wanted to have a march for the ancestors where everybody who's part of the descendant community, whether you're on the U.S. mainland or even in the U.S. territories, we all march into Washington, D.C. and demand that the president and vice president take federal action in terms of protecting Black in terms of Black and Indigenous burial grounds from being desecrated. Because right now, what's going on in Congress, that there is a bill that only addresses what happens when the public sector does something wrong, but it doesn't go after the private sector. So it needs to go after both. So that's why it's kind of like, that's one of the things that the late Queen Mother Harriet Hines was demanding to have. And so and that's very important, because sometimes we get perspectives and a way to hit things in ways we couldn't even think of. So we're proud to be an international coalition. We like to say, think globally, act locally, so to speak. So.
Sorry, unmute myself. Great, thank you very much. Anyone else? Any questions? Comment? Okay. Right. Now, I must say that this has been one informative Freedom Friday forum. I'm so happy that we've been able to have this on, coming as it is before October 6th, when we do have to make that rally at the courthouse, appeals courthouse in Annapolis. It's necessary that anyone who has the time to get out there on that day to please do. We need to have a large turnout. We need to have an impressive turnout. We need to have a turnout that will give those folks who are, officials in the courthouse, or even if they're not, they may just be there for court cases, etc. That African people are not to be messed with.
Mhm.
It's a strong message that needs to be put out.
Mhm.
Annapolis has been a slave port. Annapolis is not one of those places that does not have a history of slavery. Maryland has been a slave state. We've had some people coming out of Maryland who have been heroes in the struggle against slavery. And speaking of some Black folks who, we all know. Frederick Douglass, for one, is one of the most famous. And so I would like everyone who is here this evening, well, you don't have to verbally do it, but just give us a power salute that we're gonna be there. We're with you. Africa for Africans, at home and abroad. Also, right here in the USA, our African ancestors, their bodies, their resting places must be in peace, must not be disturbed.
Mhm.
We will take action.
Mhm.
And we must be serious. Some people aren't, and I'm talking some of our own people are not taking us seriously because, a lot of our people feel that, we're kicking against the goad. We're not going to get anywhere. They're not hopeful that we can win. I mean, we've had these disturbing cases where, we've had issues and it just peters out of the mind, especially the press is not taking it up. Some of us, we are looking for the word to come from those people who are oppressing us. So we expect them to give us the word that, that will promote our freedom. I mean, I don't understand that. And so when we're saying let's spread the word, like Robert had said, when we put out our flyers, when we put out the word so that we can share knowledge, we have to do it ourselves. That is what I'm trying to say. Don't expect the press to do it unless it's it's going to help them in some way to score points with the administrations or whoever.
Mhm.
You know, don't forget the free press is not really free. They ads is what keep them going. So anything that may disturb their customers that are putting ads out there, they will cover up. And a lot of that has happened already. Or they'll ignore it. They've been ignoring us. We have to give credit to those who have, for instance, ABC has done a couple of things for us right here in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, they're the ones who exposed, what's his name again, from the planning board.
Oh,
ABC they interviewed him and he was always he was ducking things, but they finally put the word out there about him.
Anderson.
Yes. So, when it comes to getting the word out, please, folks, don't just listen to us now and go to bed and go to sleep and forget about it. Let's get the word out. Let's rally. I mean, it's just a couple of weeks away, and it may look like we've got some time. Let's face it. I know from the fact that my mistake of not getting to my emails on time. Sometimes I don't do it every day, and I miss a lot of stuff. So it's good to have our word out early. So we're spreading the word, and we asking you to spread the word as well. All right. So I want to thank everyone for being here on another Freedom Friday Forum. We're doing this every, or let's say every month, twice a month, because we want it to be informative. We want to let people know what we are doing as the UNIACL RC 2020 here in Washington, D.C., as well as we want to let people know that we are in solidarity with what they're doing as well. Any organization, we're part of the BACC because, the BACC is about us.
Mhm.
And so any organization that is about us, we're ready to work with you. We're not trying to be, all that the be all or whatever. We want to be part and parcel of the struggle with everyone else.
Mhm.
Marcus, we are walking in the footsteps of Marcus Garvey.
Garvey.
He was a little man, but he had big shoes.
Mhm.
And it's hard to fit those shoes with our feet because when we look back and we see the history of what he has done, he has large footsteps. He died young
Mhm.
because of the work he did.
Mhm.
And we have to make him proud as an ancestor.
Mhm.
We have to continue the work. It's about freedom, it's about justice, it's about generational wealth. It's about all of us moving forward so that the African could be self-reliant, could be an image, because without that, we will never be respected.
Mhm.
We have to be powerful as a unified organ in this universe. So let's stay in the path that leads us there. Like I said, the need is for that to be done, because without that, there is no respect and they will ignore us all the way.
Mhm.
And just think of it, we just had the continent of Africa had just shown some embarrassing, well, I shouldn't go there. They still have a queen. Now they have a king, some of them. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, folks. All right. Thank you very much again. It's 8:54. Brother Senghor.
Just real quickly, Baba, I just want to, on behalf of the government of the UNIA RC 2020 internationally, and on behalf of the President General, who spoke in a conference in Panama today with our international organizer and the second assistant president general. I just want to let you all know, Assistant Kichi mentioned it, Dr. Marsha mentioned it. This is an international issue. So all of you out there listening, you can do something. Even if you go on Facebook and share what you see that's on Facebook, share it, tell everybody, because if we can't do something here with this apathy, we're not going to be able to do it anywhere. But I'm confident that, like Garvey said, count on him to be the real Marcus Garvey. We exonerate Garvey in the whirlwind and all those ancestors, including the ancestors in Moses, because they are alive and they are pushing us. So don't play with it. Don't play with it. Let's get real, brothers and sisters. Drop the apathy.
Thank you. And again, have a good night. Walk in peace. Thank you, Sister Marsha, Brother Robert, Sister Kimberlyn, Mama Nkichi, beautiful as usual. Please have a good evening.
Thank
And
you.
forward, man. One
you.
God,
One God,
Right
one
on.
destiny.
one aim,
One
name.
destiny.
one
Yes, indeed.
Africa for the Africans at home and
home
abroad.
and
Yes,
abroad.
indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Bye-bye.